Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and God of War, Ragnarok, its awesomeness, and what led to it. And as a result, I'll be talking about some of the older games because of that. And so here's how the video is going to go. I'm going to talk about God of War Ragnarok, and I'm going to talk about its gameplay. I'm going to talk about the math involved in that, the math involved in the story and building that world, the math involved in previous titles leading up to that. But more loosely on that, because I would focus on God of War Ragnarok, as I feel like, it has taken everything in such a great direction. But just to be clear, the 2018 version of God of War definitely upped things in its own right. And the reason why Ragnarok excels so hard, at least to me, is because the 2018 version of God of War did a really good job. That being said, I'm going to talk about the older games. I'm going to talk about the 2018 version of God of War in Ragnarok as we go. And here's the thing, feel free to assume all of the spoilers. If you want to just go into everything with just no knowledge of God of War, then I suggest you don't watch this video. But if you don't care or if you've played the games, please stay on board. Uh, so, spoilers ahead, and we're gonna get into it. Ready? Again, spoilers ahead. Let's go. So, with God of War Ragnarok, it came out in 2022. It's a pretty recent game. And I feel like it does an excellent job building on a lot of things that were done really well in, um, the 2018 God of War. So I'm going to talk about Ragnarok though in this beginning segment and talk about how math shows up in the game and some of those things that I'll say in Ragnarok will be applicable to the 2018 God of War version. And some of what I'm going to say about Ragnarok is a result of the series just kind of building on itself, will be applicable to the God of War series in a whole. There will be bits and pieces that just match up with everything. So here we go. God of War, Ragnarok, and God of War games in general, they are action adventure titles. They are very centered on hack and slash gameplay along with quick time events. There is some platforming as you go, though I don't think that's usually like focal point of a lot of people when they think about God of War, even though it's a big part of the game. Um, and there's also some puzzles, some good, some not so good, but we could talk about it and just know that that's personal preference, right? So with that in mind, with Ragnarok, it is great. There's a lot to do. So you start with Kratos, and with Kratos, um, you start with two major weapons: the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe that you picked up in the 2018 version. They both have similar controls just to do the basics, but they have their different combos and they have different ways that they function and flow. And no matter how you cut it, there's math involved across the board, right? So not only is there math in using these in terms of combat, but there's math that is used to upgrade them, math to use, and how like that combat flows. Now with the Leviathan axe, it is a bit more on the slow side of things, but not in a bad way. It's just like it's slow compared to the Blades of Chaos, but it gets the job done time and time again. And it is better suited for more long range attacks. And there's math in that, right? There's math in the distance that you're hitting your opponents, choosing between the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan axe, and the Blades of Chaos are pretty quicker, so there's like math in that. They have elemental components, so there's math in the damage that you're doing to specific types of opponents. And here's the thing, so you have the runics, or sorry, the ruins, and that pertains to the ability to use a light runic attack and a heavy runic attack. So there's basically your magic in this game, right? And there's math in using those, like what they do, whether it's just really bringing on the damage, bringing on the elemental side, stunning your opponents, There's math in that, and since you got two, right, two for each weapon, if we're just talking about the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe, you can use those, and there's cooldown associated with all of them. So if you want to be able to like blitz your opponent in the beginning, you can switch between your weapons using all of your ruins, and like later you get Droopnir, a spear. It's pretty fast spear that allows you to really bring the pain if you do it right. And so as you're using these weapons, you're doing different combos. You're playing with the elemental side of it, and using your ruins, right? And as you're doing all of that, not only is there math in those combos, how they function, how they flow, any elemental damage, and using the ruins attacks, um, there's math in the stats, right? There's math in your strength. Sorry, there's math in the stats, and those stats, yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I had a way that I wanted to say it. It didn't go how I planned, so I'll say it this way. There is math outside of just those combos that you're doing. There is the stat side of things, right? And that is just like inherently mathematical. You have your strength, you have your vitality, your defense, you have your runic stat that pertains to that magic that you're using. You have your cooldown stat, which pertains to, the runes and how long it takes before you can use them again. And you have different armor, um, like different like chest armor, shoulder armor, different waist armor, and these can boost your stats in various ways. And then in some cases, you might boost particular types of stats and decrease others, whatever the case may be, right? There's math in that, and that affects your gameplay. And all of your armor can be boosted over time. And there's math in that. There's math in the cost, sure, but if there's parts involved that you need that you'll be collecting along the way, there's math in that too, right? Um, and so, just off of the combat and the stats, there's a lot of math in it. And speaking of the combat, there's the idea that you can accrue relics along the games, and they allow you to do different things, and they have a cooldown time too. And some of the things that they allow you to do is, yeah, you can inflict extra damage, sure. But the type of damage might vary, right? Like maybe you're doing something electrical and you're stunning your opponent. Maybe you're doing Bifrost damage, and just stunning your opponent in general might be something that you're doing, or poisoning them. Whatever the case may be, there are games that you can play. And another element of the gameplay is that you have like it starts with just like the fury, like the rage, but you have pretty much, well, god mode. Like the idea is like for a limited amount of time Kratos can enter his rage mode, and throughout the game there are different tweaks on that, because before it might be like, oh, well, series of combos that you could do for a limited amount of time that inflicts a lot of damage, and then it might be like, oh, well, here's a charging attack, or oh, here's like some god healing, and you can beef up all those. And how are you beefing these up? Well, you see, experience, right? Is you're going on throughout the game, you are accruing experience points. You're doing that through progressing through the story and doing the side quests, doing the labors, all which have a mathematical element to them, and also just by killing everything that isn't you. But you accrue experience throughout the game, and you can use that experience in a number of ways. One of them is increasing things like your runic attacks, as well as your god mode. And the other thing is like your combos. You can unlock new combos, and with each weapon, you can also unlock different parts that will allow you to power up that weapon. And that's also something that's mathematical, and that will also allow you to unlock more combos. So you can build up the experience, but you might not be able to spend it all right away. But then when you unlock a certain amount of combos, you can be ready to go and you know go ahead and upgrade things. And here's the thing. Not only is there just math inherently in that, but math in how you, the player, are using everything, right? Because you might spend the experience points based on your play style, or based on what you think might be the most useful, at the very least, even if it maybe clashes with your style. Either way, you're making a decision. Either way, it's mathematical. And then the other big part is in this game, in Ragnarok, you also play as Atreus. And now on the controls, function pretty similarly, but they pertain to Kratos. Oh, sorry, Atreus. like, for instance, like Atreus, he's got his knife and his bow and arrow, and he also has like his runic magic. And he can also transform. Only instead of going into like a rage mode, he transforms. At one point, it's to like a wolf. Later, I think I don't know what type of bear, but it's a bear. It's a big bear. So he can transform into those throughout the games. Um, and I imagine if they continue it, he'll continue to be able to transform into different animals. But either way, in terms of the controls, they function very similar to Kratos, right? Um, and so you don't have to necessarily learn the new controls, but you'll have to learn how combat flows for Atreus and how you want to power up Atreus. Um, and there's math in that. And so right off the jump, just talking about combat, you can see that there is a lot of math in how it functions, how it flows, the combos that you're actually doing, the timing of those combos. There's math in the stats, of course, and there's math in building up those stats. There's math in collecting the experience and using that experience, and all the while you're progressing throughout the game. And things are paced in such a way that this more or less balanced out. So not only is there math in the combat, but there's math in collecting resources and using those resources, buying items, selling items, using items to make the upgrades that you want to make. There's math in the story, how it gets to you, how you progress, how the challenge level rises, and how you scale with that. And Kratos and Atreus scale with that, and their companions scale with that. There's math across the board. There's math in the world that you're playing in. There's math in the platforming elements, like because you have to have a good idea of the scale and the scope of the world that you're playing in, as well as how the different characters are going to be able to move, as well as timing. And then there's different puzzles that are involved, right? Because maybe you have to bring thing A to the thing B, and there's math in that, and those actions that are leading to that, but also how you're solving the puzzle and how the pieces of the puzzle may be presented to you, right? Because there's math in the design for that. Design overall too, but I wanted to focus in puzzles for a second because like if done well, it maybe won't be obvious, but the breadcrumbs will be there. And there's math in spreading out those breadcrumbs. There's math in how that gets to you and how you solve the puzzle. There's math in not only the scale and scope of the world, but building it itself. And like I said, the scale and scope, that's enough to talk about, right? Because you have to make sure the characters scale with the buildings and the rocks, and meanwhile, that world itself, right? The code that leads to it, how big it is, leading back to the scale and the scope. I mean, that's all mathematical in nature. And then you have, the characters and when you're interacting with them, what they might say. There's math in the voice acting, right? There's math in how the voices match the words that are getting to you, how they might make you feel. There's math in the volume of those voices, the inflection of those certain words. There's math in the mixing, right? Because you have the voices and you have whatever going on in the background. There might also be music playing, and there's different sound effects, and all that is being mixed, right? All that is coming to you to kind of paint a picture of the sound, if that makes sense. Um, but the idea is there's math in that. And for the voice actors, not only is there math in their vocal performance, right? Like being able to say those words to you, being able to inflect at the right points, being able to speak at the right vibes, being able to, imbue the words with the right emotion. There's math in that, but a lot of them, right, did motion capture for this, right? And so there's math in the motions, math in how those motions get to you, matching the speed of the characters, how they're moving from point A from point B, and how you scan that and how it gets into the game. Um, I think that might have been a weird way. I don't know why I said like scan that, but the idea is I was trying to say that, since things are motion captured, there's a lot of math and how that works in addition to the actual motions themselves and how it is depicted in the gameplay, as well as cutscenes. And, there's math in all of that too, right? Because we talked about the gameplay a fair amount. But, math in the cutscenes, how long they are, the scale and scope of them. There's math in the music, how it's composed, how it makes you feel, how long it lasts, if it loops, how that works. There's math at every conceivable level. There's math in the budgeting, math in the marketing, math in the design overall. Again, math at every conceivable level. There's math in the costs across the board to kind of like bring it back to the budget, right? Math and how much people are getting paid, math in the writing and how that's paced. Because right in a video game like this, it's open world and you're gonna have some choices that you're gonna make, but things are gonna be written in a way where it's like maybe you can go to point A, point B, and things still flow smoothly. And there's math in that. And so, with all of that being said, I wanted to talk about my experience with the game as well as the series as a whole. But before I do that, I will say quick time events, right? They're a big part of the God of War series. And, there's math in that. There's math in the button presses, the timing, and what that does. And that's cool when done right, maybe less cool when not done as right. But I would like to say that God of War has been mostly effective with dealing with the quick time events. But yeah, so onward to what I think about the story and the game as a whole, and my personal experience with the God of War franchise. The Ragnarok, the 2018 version, the original trilogy, and even though there were some games in there I didn't play, just my views on some of the way that the story unfolded. But I'll be focusing on the stuff that I have played mostly. Um, that being said, let's get into that segment of it. So I dug Ragnarok. Played it for about a month. Um, I think it was a very good progression of what the 2018 version of God of War was. I thought they did such a good job with with the 2018 version. I think they did a pretty good job of bringing God of War to a more modern age, even though there's only like 5 years between like Ascension and that new version. Stuff still changed, right? And I feel like they did a good job of at least making Kratos a bit more bearable because I got to tell you, I enjoyed like the original like trilogy for God of War, but was not a fan of Kratos at different points. And just to be clear, the character, because whether we're talking about the old God of War games or the newer ones, I think the voice acting has always been good, not only for Kratos but the other characters as well. That being said, I still wasn't a fan of Kratos in the 2018 version, but I think they did a lot to make him more human. Um, and then they did a lot to just refresh the gameplay, building on what was in those older games and bringing that to a more modern age. And I think they did that pretty well. And then Ragnarok came, and it's like it comes out 2022, 4 years after the first one, and they really upped it. Like I'm trying to just think about the best way to start with it. And I think the first thing to me was like when I started playing Ragnarok 1, it felt smoother than the 2018 version. But just to be clear, the 2018 version felt pretty smooth. And not only did it feel smooth, but it looked smooth. And here's the thing, like, what I like is that you start the game with the Leviathan axe and the Blades of Chaos. Where in the 2018 version, you start with the Leviathan axe, and it's pretty handy. It's pretty cool. It does a lot of damage, but you eventually get the Blades of Chaos, and then you get the Draupnir spear in Ragnarok, in addition to those other two weapons, and you can do a lot of damage, and you can switch between everything on the fly, and that's pretty cool. So, anyway, the God of War games have always been fun to play, and I think they did a good job of updating the look and the feel, and they kept the epic battles, and of course, out of those epic battles, I don't even know where to start, but I mean, I gotta talk about those. And like I said earlier in this video, spoilers ahead. So if you want to tune this part out, fine. But if you're along for the ride still, let's talk about it. Now, of course, when I think about like with Ragnarok in particular, I will say like because that's what I wanted to focus on for this video. Um, the Thor battles were just they were great. They were awesome. They were a good time. They were insane. And they of course reminded me of the battles with Boulder in the first, not the first game, but the rebooted version of God of War from 2018, which I feel like I've been saying a lot in this video. But not only that, it's like anytime you're dealing with anything involving a dragon, you can't really go wrong there. And I think um, the ending was like awesome because it's like this all out war. And it actually reminded me of Mass Effect 3 because okay, like whew, Mass Effect, it can get its own video for that whole series. And it's on my list. But I would like to say that with Mass Effect 3, it was I think it was a really good game. I liked it. I did not like the ending, but before you get to like the actual story part of the ending, right? That whole like last mission is like you just in this all out war, and so I feel like they did a pretty god. Sorry, I was gonna say pretty god job. They did a pretty good job of doing like a very similar thing in God of War when Ragnarok gets there. The only difference is I actually like the ending of God of War Ragnarok as opposed to Mass Effect 3. But again, I like that game. And Mass Effect is, yes, my favorite one of the Mass Effect games. And I'll get to that another time. But I liked it despite the ending. But yeah, so with Ragnarok, I think they did a pretty good job through and through. I think sometimes though, like I think like characters like Kratos and Atreus, they felt inconsistent, but at the same time, it actually kind of felt natural with the story. If that makes sense. So I liked it through and through. I think it was a huge improvement over the 2018 God of War reboot. Just to be clear, that was a phenomenal game. And I think the fact that I felt like it was that much better in Ragnarok is saying something because I feel like the 2018 version of God of War, it did a good job of bringing God of War into a more modern setting. I've played a good deal of the games, and when you go to back to the first three, like the first three that were released on consoles, it's like they were fun. With two and three being even funner than one was, because like one, I thought it was fun, but the puzzle sucked. I think the puzzles got better or less annoying depending on how you look at that in two, and that carried on to three. And while I think Kratos was kind of the worst back then, I dug the adventure. Um, I dug the gameplay. And for the third one, it was just like I don't know. You can't really feel sorry for the gods in that game. Kratos was just like, doing whatever to whoever, but it's like, you can't feel bad about them. And honestly, even though you don't agree with everything that Kratos is doing, perhaps, it was a fun game. Um, yeah, so I think there was a long run, and there was definitely like a concentrated, deliberate effort to revamp Kratos for a modern age. And while Kratos is still not one of my favorite characters, he's way more human than he was. And there are some characters though in the remake or reboot or sequels, depending on how you look at them, that I feel like really shine. And of those characters, I will say Freya is my favorite. Like, I'm glad things got like patched up in Ragnarok because I'm like, nah, y'all can't do that to her. Like, don't make her the villain. Like, don't make her fight them. And there was a really cool part because like I really dig voice acting and like people put so much time, energy, and effort into it. There was this scene like where Kratos is fighting Freya and her like Valkyrie form with Atreus, and Atreus he goes beast mode and whatnot, and so Kratos has third string him, and it just like it stuck with me. But he says she was our friend, you know? And it's like you could feel the pain in there. It's like you could tell like he did not want to have this fight and he did not want Atreus trying to take her out. And like so it was like that hit me. There was a lot of powerful scenes, but I that stuck with me. Um so yeah, God of War Ragnarok is a great game and there's a lot of things that have led to that awesomeness. And math is in all of them, right? So at this point, there's around 10 games or so. Uh, Including Ragnarok. And so you have like over a decade of games leading to that, as well as comics. And then there's like, a show on the horizon. God of War is a pretty big series, and I feel like it's done a good job of jumping into the modern age. And Ragnarok is an awesome title, and there's so much that led to it. Because when you think about it, right, it came out in 2022. That's 17 years after the original one. So, almost 20 years. A lot has happened to Kratos, a lot has happened to gaming, a lot has happened in this world. But y'all know that one, right? A lot has happened. But yeah, so I enjoy Ragnarok. I would safely say that is that it is my favorite God of War title. I don't know if they'll continue, but if they do continue, I hope they up the ante, and I'd be curious to see what they do. And also, I'd like to mention that Odin was hilarious in this game to me because it's like he's not quite what you expect. And I like that. It's just like he is kind of the worst, but it's like in an entertaining way. And most of the characters were good. I liked Angerboda. I liked Thrud. There were several moments where I did not like Thor, but he was an interesting character. Um, and I like that Sif comes around at the end, like his wife, when everything's said and done. I think they do a good job of just like letting you explore the rounds, and just going on these adventures. It was pretty cool, and there were crazy shenanigans with the world serpent that I thought that was cool that it played out. Um, and just yeah, overall, it is great stuff. They poured a lot into Ragnarok, and there was a lot that led to its awesomeness. Again, nearly 20 years. 20 years of games. I don't know how long the comics have been around, but they've been firmly in the mix. Um, and here we are, almost 20 years after the first one. We have Ragnarok, and it did pretty well. They had recently come out with a new game plus, which actually happened while I was playing the game. Which there's new armor, new challenges, the abilities to do more with your companions. And like there was so much that I mentioned in this video, but so much I didn't, that you could just like play some games with them. But hey, yeah, there's math in that, or hey, yeah, that was pretty cool, right? Because there's math in the companions and how you use them, and um, math and just how that all pans out, and that desire to do a new game plus. It's like, is that going to be worth it to you? It's up for you to decide, and you have to consider the time that you're going to put in it, and what you might get out of that. And I do think that's interesting. And then there is the challenges too, right? Like, because I meant to mention those, but like you can play that game too, where it's like, oh, there's math in the number of challenges, how they function, they flow, the amount of opponents that you have to defeat, and there's math in their health, math in your health, and then math in the rest of the gameplay, which I discussed earlier, right? Um, so yeah, though there's so much to discuss, but God of War Ragnarok is an awesome game with a big history behind it, and I think it rocks. If you haven't played it, I hope you do. Even if you've heard some of the spoilers in this one, if you have played it, I mean, you should talk to me about it. I dug it. Overall, though, I just I have mostly good things to say about that game, as you can tell, and I hope we continue the conversation in the comments. I will see you in the next one. Professor Prime out.